Hi, I'm Susan Clare, the Gourmet Quilter, and I'm going to show you today how I do some of my free motion applique. This is in particular for a project that's starting very shortly. It's a block of the day. It's called the Daily Dot, and it's going to be running for 2017. So today I just wanted to go through the method I've used for the applique. All these little blocks, and yes, there's 365, it's for the whole of 2017. They're all fused raw edge applique. So I was just going to show the method that I've used for that. I'm not showing the whole process with the circles and things, but just the applique of the picture that's inside. So if you're interested in signing up to do the block of the day, that's available to purchase. It's a downloadable pattern that will come out throughout the year 2017, and it's available to purchase on GourmetQuilter.com. It's called Block of the Day 2017, the Daily Dot, and it's all about the family dot. So there's all pictures of Granny and Granddad and Mum and Dad and the kids and things that they get up to throughout a year. So not a diary, but just general things that family people do, and friends, of course, throughout the year. So just to get on to the applique, if you've already signed up to do the Daily Dot, then you'll have received a pattern by email, and what you're going to get is a pattern like this, and this is how all the block patterns are going to come throughout the year. And so there's going to be a photograph, a diagram, and then all the shapes ready to trace. And the one I'm going to show you today is the applique. It's actually the first block of the quilt, block number 1, and it's actually on the very top row, a bit hard for you to see just at the moment, but it's up in the top corner there. The quilt is constructed in rows, and they're colour bands as we come down loosely through seasons. So just to give you a bit of an idea of that. So first of all, we're going to have some fabrics, and I have a lot of nice bits and pieces. I'm actually using specifically some Hoffman barley dots, so they're batiqued, and they're all a little bit dotty because we're all about the family dot. In dots everywhere really, just gone a little dotty. So I've got a nice array of bits and pieces. There is a needs list and tells you everything I've used that comes in the pattern, if you were to sign up for it. So what we do is we trace all our shapes, and the shapes are all ready to trace onto a fusible web with a paper backing. So the fusible web we're using, I've suggested a heat and bond light, but you may have a preferred one. It doesn't need to be this particular one. The heat and bond light has a paper on one side and a fusible glue, a heat reactive glue on the other side. So you can feel the difference. It's quite rough on the glue side, quite smooth on the paper side. So we're going to trace our shapes onto that. You can usually see through that paper quite well enough to do things like that. And then we're going to roughly cut them out. So we don't necessarily want them cut out on the actual finished line that we're going to be cutting, but just a little bit away, so that when we fuse this onto the wrong side of our fabric, which is how it all works, then we can cut out the shape right on the line with the fusible paper still attached, so that you get a really nice edge. So I'll do that now, just so that you can see the whole process. I'm sure some of you know how to do this, but maybe there's some who don't. So what this does is gives you a nice glue backing, so that the shapes will sit exactly where you put them when we iron them onto the background that we're using. So, and I'll just talk a little bit about these scissors that I've got. These delicious scissors. They're actually called they're called Perfect Scissors, and they're by Karen K. Buckley. And I discovered these on one of my trips overseas, and they are exactly what they're called, the Perfect Scissors for applique. They have on the blade here that's got the little bit of writing on it, there's actually a very fine serration along that blade there, and what that does is it allows the fabric to be gripped by the scissors. It won't fall off because it's going to hold it. It's not going to slide around, and it allows you to cut nice fine little shapes very easily with some scissors. As well as that, they've got these wonderfully soft squidgy handles, which means that if you're doing a fair bit of cutting, you don't get those really sore little spots. Maybe you don't do as much cutting as I've done sometimes, but your hands can get quite sore, and these are wonderful because that doesn't happen. So now I'm going to cut out this shape on the actual cutting drawn line, because that's the actual shape that I want. The pattern allows for little overlap, underlap areas, and they're usually marked on the pattern. And so this is fairly straightforward, but I thought if you saw the whole process, that would be quite helpful. So now I don't need that piece. And so I've got my piece here with the fusible, the paper's still on there, so we now need to take the paper off. So if you give it a little wiggle, usually that'll loosen the paper, and you can just peel that off. And of course, because you're watching, it's going to be difficult today. And here it comes off, and so what that's doing is leaving a glue on the back side of the fabric now, so that we don't need the paper anymore. So I can now position that. So I've actually already started positioning onto my background. Now my background square I've cut out, and because we're sitting everything inside these circles, I've actually drawn a circle. Now the pattern is going to give you all the circle sizes and things, so I've actually drawn just very lightly a pencil circle of where my applique is going to go on my block. So I've positioned that, and I've already started positioning a couple of pieces. Now on the pattern you'll notice that all the pieces are numbered, and that's numbered generally speaking in the order of placement, and that's because some pieces overlap others. So piece 1 is actually this pedestal, which is this is the letterbox that we're doing. So that's gone down first, and then I've gone on to say piece 2 is actually this red piece I've cut. I have in fact skipped a couple, and I've popped number 6 down because it doesn't really make any difference, but I wanted to get that in place. So now I'm going to continue positioning. So I've got my little red letterbox here, and that's just going to sit nicely on top of that pedestal, and I'm going to iron that in place. So it doesn't need a lot of ironing. The other thing I should mention is with my background square, I have actually just used a very light coating of a spray starch, and that just gives it a little bit of body. It's not really stiff or anything, but it's not quite as floppy as without. So, and that'll help when we're doing the free motion stitching. So I'll just position these other pieces on here. So we're going to put the little roof on the letterbox, and then I'm just going to show you how I do the stitching. This is the little slit that all the letters go into. Pop that on our letterbox because we want to be able to get our mail. And then we've got a little circle here that a number gets marked on, so that we know that what street number we're at. And I'm just trying to make sure I get this round the right way because I've already taken the paper off. And that's going to go on there with our street number on it. And so that's all ironed on and ready to go. And you can see with the circle it's all going to sit nicely in there because I'd marked the circle, and as I said, all that information will come with the main part of the pattern. So now I'm going to move this little bit out of the way and go to the sewing machine. And so I've got my machine set up for free motion stitching. I've dropped my feed teeth, I've got a free motion foot on the machine there, and I've just got a neutral grey thread in. You can use matching threads if you want to. I'm not a really big fan of chopping and changing colours all the way through my applique, so I tend to just use one colour. So I'm just going to start free motion stitching now. So it doesn't really matter where you start, you can start anywhere you like. I'm going to start on this little pedestal here, and I'm going to come up. So I'm going to drop my foot, even though I can move my fabric around because I've got the free motion foot on. You still need to drop the foot lever if that's the type of machine that you have. That puts the tension on your threads, and it'll stitch better for you that way. Well, it might not stitch at all without that. And I do a couple of little stitches just to lock it, and then I just start moving that around. So I'm just sewing close to that edge. Now you can just skip on to the next shape to keep going, or you could stop and start if you wanted to. And I'm just going to keep going onto this roof here. So this thread that I've got is fairly light, it'll stand out a bit on here. I quite likely would use a slightly different colour, but this way I thought you'd be able to see it as well. So just take your time if you're going to do the free motion. Now, of course, if you don't want a free motion and you have a preferred way of doing your applique, that is absolutely fine. I'm just showing you this because this is how I've done mine. Now, a couple of little stitches to lock off, and I'm going to take that out, and then I'm going to go on to the next little shape. So you can see, really, it's not taking too long to do all this. So a little block a day doesn't seem out of reach. I'm just going to do the little slit in the letterbox now. Same thing, I've done my couple of little locking stitches. I'm just going to trim those threads away now and then come back and do the next little shape. So you can see with the free motion I don't have to keep turning the work. If you haven't done free motion applique like this before, give it a go, try it out, see whether you like it. You may not, but you will find that the more you do, the easier it becomes, and then all of a sudden you wonder, why didn't you do that in the first place? And what was all that worry about? It's really not so bad. So I'm going to come down the other side now of the letterbox, a couple of locking stitches. I'm going to meet up with the stitching where I started on the letterbox, but I want to come back down this pedestal here now, so I'm actually just going to double stitch back over that little area there so that I can come down to here, a couple of stitches again, and now there's just this piece along the ground to do here, so I'll go ahead and do that, and that's all the stitching done. Then there's just a little bit of pen work to do, and how amazingly easy is that? And because we're going to be popping a circle over the edge, you don't need to worry too much about things on that outside edge there. Just get these threads out of the way. So I'm just trimming off any of these few threads here that we don't need. And there's my applique. So nothing has to be absolutely perfect and exact. With this type of applique, it's a slightly sort of folky style. And so now what I'm going to show you on the pattern, or in the picture, it's the family dot live at 17 dot way. So we're just going to mark their numbers and the dot way on our block. Now you could embroider them if you wanted to, or you may have some other preferred method. I'm just going to use one of these micron pens, which are great on fabric. You can see I've got a nice set. There's some colours in this set. They're just fine pens, like a 0.1 or 0.3. You don't want them too heavy. And so on here there's a number 17, and this is, again, all of this information is in the pattern for you. And I will just mark that on here. And these pens are designed to go onto fabric and to be permanent. And I'm just going to write the dot way. Now you may want to trace something if you're not too sure about writing it straight away, and I'm never too sure myself. However, I just go ahead and do it. And it doesn't show up a huge amount on that red, but it's number 17 dot way using a micron pigment pen, which go permanent. I probably would just give that a quick iron as a little setting process. And now that I've done that, and that's done, all my applique is done, and it's now ready for the circle, and that information, as I said, will come later in the pattern. So it's going to end up looking like this. All the blocks are done with a little circle surround on them. If you're interested in doing the daily dot, if you haven't already signed up, as I mentioned, on GourmetQuilter.com. But if you're already signed up, thank you so much, and we're going to have a great year ahead of us, and this was just to give you an idea of how the applique goes. So looking forward to the rest of the time.